Zero. Okay, it should be.
Excellent. Our ears.
Hi. Unmute yourself.
My lighting's pretty awful in here.
There's an option to enhance your appearance. Maybe you want to do that. Maybe you don't want to use video because you're frozen.
Oh, where is it?
You know you're still muted.
I'm not muted.
Oh, because you're using your phone for the audio? Gotcha.
No.
Hello, room. I have to go get my coffee.
pin doesn't match a meeting that's ready to start soon. Enter the meeting pin followed by the pound key.
Great.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, my internet's pretty unstable. I tried calling in, but it won't let me call in yet.
Because the meeting hasn't started.
Yeah, but it let you get in and wait.
That's a fair point.
Also, the in Wild Apricot,
Mm-hmm.
you put the location as Zoom, and it tries to load up through maps.
Oh,
That's a pain.
should I go in and edit that real quick?
If you can.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. in the meeting now. There are 3 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. You have been put on hold by the host. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing star 6.
Come here, Sally. Come here.
And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Just taking care of a few things, and we will be opening the mics up shortly. Everyone's doing well, and hear more from you soon.
Good morning, Zach. This is Chris Carter, joining via conference.
Great. Good morning.
I'm going to mute, just trying it out, though.
Yep, sounds good. Also, anyone who's calling in with a phone number, there is the option to rename your phone number to your actual name. If you feel tech savvy enough to do so, that would be cool, and no pressure to do so.
Okay. I can try doing that, changing my number to a name.
Yeah, so over by the mute button for myself, there's the option to click more, and the drop down for more, the first thing says rename. But that might actually only be my ability. I'm not 100% sure now that I look at it.
Yeah, I went phone line because my internet is not always rock solid. It goes in and out, and if it's video, I'm sure I'd just be in and out.
All good.
From home office, with everybody else using Wi-Fi locally. All right. I'm going to go back to mute. I'll try to see if I can rename it.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody who's just got in. We are just taking care of a couple things in the background, but we'll be starting shortly. Thanks for being here this morning. Morning, everybody. We're still taking care of a couple things in the background. This is Zach Sarkis from New York HempLab. Appreciate you all being on, and we'll be getting started shortly.
How are you guys doing?
Hey, Dr. Harold, how are you?
Okay.
Hey, Doc.
Hello, Dr. Harold. How are you?
Great. I'm glad to see the sun a little bit today, huh? It was a nice sunrise.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
How are you, Steve?
Hanging in there.
Good.
How about you?
Social distancing is my thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope not. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Harold, how you doing?
Okay.
Any any bright news maybe? Anything to look forward to?
If you're a boxer, someone throwing a left hook at you first is what you look forward to. Then you know his style.
Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, that's what we're getting right now. Society is really kind of on one knee now, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But I think there's a wellspring of optimism that is indigenous to our genetics. And, you know, I just look at what my parents after World War II, there was nothing to be seen. Buildings were devastated, and I was conceived. You know, so it reflects a certain optimism in the world, I think, to bring a child forth.
Yeah. I'm wondering, because I remember when I was a kid looking in my grandparents' basement and finding like the stashes of supplies from the Great Depression mentality and World War II mentality. I'm wondering if that's going to make a repeat.
I don't know. I'm planning to give all mine away to Food Link.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do panic buying or anything like that, but it is kind of amazing going through the stores and seeing that.
Yeah. Well, people don't know, and there's a lot of words being used that are not clear. There's recommendations of, you know, serious stuff from Cuomo to Trump, and we're looking at what's happened in China and Italy. It's you know, if I wasn't more scientifically inclined, I would start wondering, where is there truth? There's someone, you know, am I walking into a trap or something? And I don't feel that way, but I understand how others might. And
Yeah, it's.
Has anybody looked into this medication by chance?
this medication means
Meaning chloroquine, and the hydrochloroquine.
a lot of people have been looking into it.
Yeah, like 4 days ago. My name's Adam Stauffer, by the way. It's nice to meet y'all.
How are you doing?
Doing well. I talked to Tom Sunday night and Gordon, and I called them because I just did my own little research on this medicine when they said that they were using it in other countries. And when Cuomo stated that he got 750,000 units of it, I started looking into what the CDC dosage was for it. And they're giving 300 milligram tablets of this stuff. With us having an average of 5 liters of blood at 300 milligrams, that's 60 milligrams per liter of blood. I mean, that's double the lethal dose as listed on Wikipedia.
Yeah, but do you have COVID-19?
No.
Then don't take the drug.
Right, I understand that, but there's 800,000 people across New York State in these facilities.
So I'm going to interrupt everybody for just a second. My name is Zach Sarkis. I'm the founder of New York HempLab. I'm going to put, basically everyone's going to be on mute for the next little bit. Dr. Harold Smith is going to give an introduction regarding some of the developments he's seen with COVID-19 and his laboratory, which is pretty exciting and interesting stuff amidst, you know, these challenging times. We'll then go into a discussion on the presentation from Kalen Cassiter from CSG regarding recent developments on the state level, and then we'll open it up to a roundtable discussion where a handful of us are going to have our mics unmuted, and then there's opportunity for people to begin to ask questions, just so it's not just crazy. we'll have some form of organizational structure. So there's ways to raise your hand or ask a question through the chat. So I offer that if there's big questions that come up to drop a line in the chat box. And then we could also open up the mics moving forward accordingly. So just that's my hope for this flow. This is really our first HempLab attempt at the webinar, so this is really exciting. I'm actually trying to get a couple things going on in the background. Let me just finish this up. But yeah, Dr. Harold, well, actually, I'd love to give before we get started, a big shout out to our, what I call our sponsor, our premium level membership, Harris Beach law firm based out of Rochester, New York. Big support. It's a few other business memberships, Forefathers Innovation, Canamil, Boyle & Code, Tracy Jung Law Firm, and the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. I'm going to work on getting some slides up in the background, and in the meantime, pass it over to Dr. Harold Smith. Dr. Harold Smith is, I'll let him do a full introduction of himself, but he presented at the first New York HempLab in 2018 at Wegman School of Pharmacy at St. John Fisher College. His laboratory has been developing medicine to combat some of the most intense diseases really on the planet. And really with the emergence of COVID-19 and the impact it's having across the board, let alone in the cannabis industry, we thought it was really important to start with some grounding words and some exciting words and some information regarding COVID-19 from Dr. Smith before we continue. So Harold, I'll pass it off to you. And yeah, everyone, thank you so much for being here.
Well, Zach, thanks for the invitation to do so. It struck me initially as somewhat unusual to be having a HempLab conference on chemistry other than from the plant, but I'm glad to share since I'm deep into this right now. I wanted to, I don't know exactly, there's so much information, so I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna speak a little bit about 4 things. I'm going to speak about what this virus is and what it's not. I'm going to speak a little bit about the history of what you're seeing in terms of everyone claiming that they have something or going to have something. What is that all about? And then kind of look at drugs that are available and then what we have for the future. What's the future outlook for this? Okay, so roughly 4 kind of statements. And I'm going to pause between each one so that anyone can ask me questions, because I don't want to deliver this at a level that's above anyone's head. I want to keep it within an understanding, and I think that's very important. So with that introduction of my content, Zach, does that sound all right?
Yeah, that's great, Harold. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So first of all, just so that everyone knows, viruses come in families like any other creature or organism. It's a life form with a genetic code. And the coronavirus has been with us and all mammals on the surface of the planet for millennia. And it's been testing us in various ways. There's 4 groupings of coronavirus, and 2 of those groupings can infect animals and people. And so the coronavirus we're looking at today is one of those that jumps between animals and people by contact with them and them with us. Coronavirus is responsible for 15% of the common colds. Every common cold that I have ever had about a 15% probability of being corona instead of influenza or something else. There's 5 viruses that can cause cold symptoms, and corona is responsible for about 15% of the colds that any of us have ever seen up till now. What makes the current coronavirus that causes COVID-19 so nasty is that coronavirus doesn't know how to accurately make copies of itself, and it makes mistakes. And what happens is that most of the time, those mistakes actually are lethal to the virus. Those viruses don't survive. You never know anything's happened because that mistake screws up something that the virus needs to do, and the genetic code is not good for that virus. But other times, just by happen chance, a change occurs in the genetic code that gives this virus extra oomph, more strength. And COVID-19 as a disease that we're seeing is the result of a virus that's learned how to be more stable between transmissions. So how long does a virus last on a surface? It is more virulent in terms of the rate at which it infects. So this is working better for the virus to make copies of itself. And the disease that manifests, we don't know why, but there's a group of age group where getting the virus doesn't have any ill effects, so below 20. But if you're in your 60s, like I am, and above, our immune systems are set up in slightly a different way that this new version of coronavirus now really capitalizes on, feels very at home with, and is able to create symptoms like pneumonia that can eventually cause us to have respiratory failure, which means you can't breathe and therefore you die. And that's been a tragic situation. So coronavirus has always been with us. There are many versions of this. Once in a while, there's a mutation in the coronavirus that gives it extra kill power, if you will. And what we're looking at today is such a virus. Statements like this is a disease we have never seen before, this is totally new, all those are not accurate. We have seen coronavirus before, and we know it's responsible for colds. And here's the segue into the history part of it. In 2002, a coronavirus called SARS broke out, United States, South America kind of thing. And what flattened the curve then, which knocked off the amount of people who were being infected immediately and reduced that spread, was social isolation, bringing people who were sick into the hospital right away and responding to it as if it was a contagious disease in the beginning. You know that in Wuhan city, the Chinese government tried to suppress that information. And that's why this broke out, because they didn't want it to be known as an infectious disease. And so as a consequence, the disaster in China occurred. So in 2002, we had SARS. That cost in those day dollars, in 2002 dollars, 50 billion worth of economic damage. And people rallied, the pharmaceutical industry rallied and said, okay, just let's make a vaccine, let's try to do something. But because of the flattening of the curve, in a couple of years, there was no major disease anymore. The number of infections had reduced so much that there was no financial incentive for the pharmaceutical industry to continue trying to develop a vaccine. So everything about SARS was academics doing little things here, little things there, because there was not a force to be reckoned with, no SARS. And lo and behold, we did nothing. In 2012, MERS emerged, which is a coronavirus, has different mutations than SARS did. So MERS is a new version of coronavirus. It was isolated in the Middle East, and in the Middle East alone, it cost $22 billion in 2012 dollar value to the economy. People rallied, tried to make vaccines. It failed. Nothing happened. And in 2 years, the curve flattened and we did nothing. We let it go. This COVID-19 is strike three, all right? And what's being promised to people is that we'll have a vaccine in about 18 months. Well, that's a long time, but 18 months, that's how long it takes to discover a vaccine. But in the moonshot for 2002 and 2012, 18 years ago, we had the opportunity to make vaccines, and we didn't because it was in no one's economic interest to do so. We failed. And now we're going to take a moonshot again in 2020, promising people to make a vaccine. And so this is something you have to understand, that making a vaccine is not something where you pick a number and then it works. This is more of a scratch and sniff experiment. And it's hard to make a vaccine. That's something that you stick in your body that causes your immune system to react to make antibodies to protect yourself. But those antibodies have to be really strong. They have to bind to the virus. They have to neutralize the virus. And making antibodies is one, but making strong antibodies is two. That's why it's so difficult to get a vaccine going. You have to try a bunch of different things. So the history of this is that in the absence of vaccines, what are we to do? And so now I'm segueing into the third part, where scientists 24/7, 365 days a year, apply their skills and their thinking to come up with new ways of solving how does life work. And in that process, we developed the tools, and such tools that are unimaginable when I first started my career. For example, how did we know that this was a coronavirus with a new mutation within weeks of it breaking out? That's because of the revolution of molecular biology, where all these viruses' genetic code are known and stored in libraries. And all you have to do is try to determine the genetic code of a virus in an infected patient, compare it to that library, and you have in minutes. You can say, this is coronavirus, and it has some mutations. It's different than anything else. To me, that's amazing. And I'm in science, that we can do that. So it's a win for society that we've supported science to the point where we could figure out what's getting us in this disease. The endeavor, though, is very much where every scientist comes up with ideas, they put together a plan, they ask for funding, other peers in science decide whether it's good or not good, and that's why we didn't do much after 2002 and 2012, because the scientists would say, well, you know, why are we spending money on SARS? I mean, it's no longer a disease. And so those grants would not be funded, that research would not be done, and that's how we move forward. So now you're seeing a new opportunity. And everyone has something that they've been working on, and they want to rally and bring that forwards. That's actually a good thing that people want to do that. It's a confusing thing for everyone else, because what do you believe? You know, who has something? So if someone's saying they're going to develop vaccines, you know that's at least almost 2 years out, and it should be done, but it's version 2.0 of our response, not 1.0. If someone says they're going to begin finding out how to look at chemicals and other drugs that have been off-label and off-market, and they're going to start digging through that to see if there's a way of tackling the virus, excellent idea. That's called high-throughput screening drug discovery. It has its place. It is version 2.0, because those drugs are 5 years away. All right, so now we're really left with, we don't have vaccines. We didn't make them in the past. And you should ask yourself, if vaccines were made in the past, why didn't they come forwards right away? And the answer is because we couldn't do it for 18 years. That's why they're not here now. What is here? Well, I'm going to do research and find a drug. Okay, that's 5 years away. I'm going to develop a vaccine. That's 2 years away. What else do we have, for goodness sakes? People are dying. And that's the kind of response that we're looking at right now. It's a Hail Mary. And chloroquine, for example, is something a gentleman asked me about earlier. It's a malarial drug. It was discovered by Bayer back in the days when we were digging the Panama Canal, 1934. Actually, in 2005, after the corona outbreak in 2002, Bayer showed that chloroquine could have a condition that it creates in your body where the virus can't infect. And that's what it does. It changes our pH balance. And so the virus can't be sucked into your cells, so you don't get infections that way. But it's a very, very weak response. The chemistry is not designed specifically for the virus. And other than Gilead's remdesivir, as it's called, which is a component of the genetic code, a small piece of that the virus gets confused when it sees and stops making copies of itself. Other than remdesivir and my compound OIA1, which is similar to remdesivir, but approximately 10 times more potent. The issue is we really don't have anything, and everything has to be explored and tried. There's two things in that, and this is the fourth part segue into drug discovery. Our FDA.
Harold, we do have
Yeah.
one question. If
Sure.
you want to take a question, as you said.
Sure, fire.
Let's see. All right, it's all yours.
Yes, Harold. I had a question for you. Like you said, and like I've done this research myself a little bit about how the medicine chloroquine sends the body into a pH alkaline state. I'm a grower, cannabis grower. So I've been growing for 25 years, and you know, we call this plant the tree of life, and it teaches us a lot about ourselves, honestly, if we look. And you know, like cannabis has to stay in a range when it's grown at like right around 6.3, 6.5. And if you don't keep it in that range, it starts showing mobile and immobile deficiencies in the leaves. Liviana, I'm on the phone. I'll be down in a minute. And when it starts showing those mobile and immobile deficiencies in the leaves, unlike us, I mean, we show symptoms, but it's not like as, I guess, vivid as plants do, as these cannabis plants. Like when these plants get a deficiency, they show it in the leaves like immediately, like within a couple days, and you can determine what that is. And usually 99% of the time, as a cannabis grower, I know that the reason being is because the pH is probably off in the soil, and it's not uptaking a nutrient fast enough, or it's taking it up too fast. So therefore, if we look at ourselves like these plants, with our diets, with the medicines that we've been taking for years, with the environments that we live in, I mean, we live in an acidic environment, and we're not acidic creatures in biology. I mean, our blood is 7.3, 7.4, and I truly believe in my heart that, you know, like I have a friend of mine, me and him, we both drink high pH water, 9.0 water. And the reason being is because I started looking into heartburn. I was having really bad heartburn, acid indigestion, and it was really killing me. And I didn't want to take medicines. I didn't believe in medicines. And, you know, I started drinking high pH water. Sure enough, I haven't had any problems ever since. And then like my stools are better, my body's better, my health is better. And it's just like, I don't understand. I believe there are answers that are left here on this planet for us that we need to look into that might not take $1 billion, you know? And I
would take, that's the question. So now you're a grower of a particular type of hemp or marijuana. Which cultivar of marijuana, at what concentration, through what route of administration, eating, skin, inhaled, which one of those will work best to cure the coronavirus in a person who's infected? And just imagine the amount of time that would take, and how many growers would say they've got the superior strain, and the kind of battles that goes on. So this is what you're saying is absolutely correct. We're connected in biology, even though there's plants and animals. By the time you see a leaf changing its structure, the inside the cell stuff has happened that leads to that. By the time a person has problems by taking a drug or being infected with a virus, there's a long series of gradual events that occur that lead to that, what we call pathology. And so you're absolutely correct. There's connections there all over. What's not going to be true, my speculation, is that even if someone says, stop all this drug discovery, let's use this wonderful plant and see if we can't find something, the same kind of crawling over each other with who's on first and who's got the shiny object and how does it work and all that stuff. You know, this is the nature that I'm trying to point to. There's a good part of this that people want to be part of a solution. I strongly encourage that in the students that I teach. But there has to be some sense to the noise and some direction. And usually that direction is given by a government, right? And that's not what we're getting clearly now, a clear direction. So your points are absolutely on the mark for, you know, cannabis having curative potentials. I believe in that. I've seen it in my own family. But I think we're struggling because no one ever asked the question, how does cannabis really affect a virus, right? And that's, we're left with that as an unknown. So did that help answer your question in any way? You're on.
It's not cannabis that
It sounds like the question is regarding the acidity and how our bodies are impacted. Am I not mistaken?
Yeah. So in terms of the pH balance in our body, it's not uniform. And so we play with pH in different places, right? For example, our tissues are more acidic than our lungs are. And it's that difference in pH depending on which tissue you're in that allows oxygen to bind to hemoglobin or let loose in our tissues. So that pH is essential. There's some places in our body that are.
But if you look at the body, yes, if you look at the body, the different parts have different pH levels. But naturally, once it goes through our system, you got to think, like, I would believe that the more acidic things that we take on, eventually over time, whether it's our foods, our processed meats, whatever it might be that's out there that's acidic that we take into our bodies. Okay. And we do it willingly as people. We do it willingly. Me and my brother talked about it, and we were like, listen, this is our fault because we're not educated. We don't know what we're doing really to ourselves. Because with that being said, we know that disease, infection, and stuff like that, it doesn't grow in an alkaline environment. It's like, we know this through science. So therefore, like bacteria like bacillus that are in a 7.0 to 8.0 range, they're starting to use this as an antibody. There's different things out there that people, need to look at other than cannabis. Cannabis is just a piece of it. It might be a small, minute piece of it, but the water we drink, the foods that we're eating, the things that we're putting, the hair products that we're using, whatever it is that we're putting all over our body, our skin is like, it's the same as lungs. Your kidneys secrete, the different liquids or whatever to be able to, I'm not a scientist, but it'll secrete either an alkaline or a acid liquid in order to adjust your pH in your body. You know what I mean? So it's like we're designed to regulate ourselves, but just like anything else, like a plant, like the cannabis plant, it's designed to regulate itself, but it has to stay within a normal pH range. And if we don't keep our bodies, I believe in my heart, and I feel this like wholeheartedly, if I don't keep, I have 5 children, so I really think about them every day. And I'm like, listen, pHing our bodies, thinking about ourselves, we really need, like people say, you cannot help somebody else unless you help yourself. So I feel like until people are educated and they realize exactly how simple the human body works, just like any other creature or thing or living organism out there in biology, it has a pH balance in a range. And I feel like people are missing out on the simplest answer. Simplest answer.
I think there's a lot of
osteoporosis, bone disease, all this stuff. My aunt's got.
Keep questions to the end, please.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think there's a lot there. It's definitely Pandora's box, and I think there's definitely a lot of value in asking those questions, and especially referring it back to the cannabis plant is a very interesting model for education. I think, Harold, I'd love to have you continue just for the sake of time to begin to start looking at the industry updates as well. I know you're getting to your 4th point, but there's it's definitely important questions to ask, and there's a lot of perspective. We got another cool question in the chat that I think we'll save questions for later at this point, just for process flow. But obviously, there's a lot we can dig into, and I appreciate those questions.
Please remember your questions, because I think a lot comes out in the question period that's important. And I would just, to the gentleman who's talking about a body pH, it's absolutely a valid point of how we balance, all of that, and it affects our physiology. There's a part to this that I think is a little bit not true, and that is that our body is simple. What you're saying essentially is that by measuring the cars that come off an assembly line, you can understand how the steel and rubber and plastic is assembled inside the factory. And scientists like myself try to understand why that car looks that way based on how the factory is working inside. And part of that factory is pH, right? Part of that factory is other things, gene expression. So it's far more complicated. The fact that coronavirus for COVID-19 is more virulent than the prior COVID says that there's something else going on. And the part of that all we understand now is that the genetic code of those viruses, while 96% identical, the 4% that's not identical makes a difference between life and death for people. And drugs today, and this is going to the 4th point, in order for, in a calm day where all you're doing is going to get a coffee or your biggest dilemma is a flat tire, the FDA approach to drug discovery is to find something inside that car factory that is absolutely essential for cars to work, for the virus to be effective, ask if that is a real true weakness, an Achilles heel, and then ask what kind of ways of approaching that can we do? Vaccines, change in diet, nutraceuticals, natural products, all those questions come forwards. What actually targets the Achilles heel? And then the FDA asks for you to do testing in one animal, a rat, and then do testing in another animal, a dog or a non-human primate like a monkey. And then once you clear all those efficacy, acting on the target, and safety, the animal didn't drop dead at some doses, then you're given permission to approach the FDA. This was a big problem for cannabis because people who want to use full spectrum cannabis products, the FDA does not like to approve complicated mixtures. They like to approve the silver bullet. And so the process impedes everything. The FDA process creates good drugs, but it's in a time of need, in a time of pandemic, the system is not geared for fast tracking anything forwards. So here we sit with great ideas. Maybe people should adjust their diets and do something else, and maybe a third thing, and then that will keep the coronavirus from infecting you. And the FDA doesn't want to hear anything about that. What they want to hear is there something like chloroquine? It's already been in people for malaria. Fantastic. Who has that chemistry? Okay, Bayer does. Fantastic. All right, so now let's just give it to people and see what happens. And that's what the FDA prefers doing, and yet once they get onto something, and this is the real problem for us nowadays, is the pharmaceutical industry, the big pharma, lobby all the senators and Congress people and contribute to their campaigns. And therefore they tell our government what is the correct choice. So anyone like my company, Oyogen, who comes up with OYA1 as a chemistry that was already in people, and we have demonstrated with the FDA, with the federal government, the NIH, in their labs at Fort Detrick with live virus that our compound absolutely kills off all forms of the coronavirus, we're considered interesting, an academic question, but people with bigger and deeper pockets are already there. Thank you very much. And someday we may avail ourselves of you. So we don't actually get to sit on the racetrack. This is not a situation where people say, okay, so version 1.0, who has something? You have chloroquine, you have remdesivir, you have OYA1. All right, let's set all those cars on the track and do one lap and see what happens. That's not the way they do it. They pick winners and losers. And as a consequence, we have remdesivir out there and having all sorts of problems. We have chloroquine going out there, and immediately people are pinging on that there's problems with how much dose you can take safely. In fact, if you've ever taken chloroquine, like what I did when I went to Kenya for a scientific conference, I had to dose days ahead, then stop, and then days afterwards, and then stop. It was, I didn't feel any toxic effects by taking it, but like the leaf that eventually turns brown, I don't know what's going on in my body during those times. So I think that understanding why there's so many people trying to say they have something is a good thing. They want to try. That this is a vaccine, so just hold on and you're going to get one. I think you really need to say, no, we're not interested in that conversation right now. Go ahead and develop a vaccine if you can, but that would break an 18-year trend of you not being able to. So, but continue doing that. And by the way, our federal government is putting $4 to 1 on vaccine development as opposed to small molecule treatment. So we have to change the lobbying temperament in the whole situation in order for us to have ideas from people, from scientists, from whatever, get vetted in a proper manner. And so Oyogen has understood this. We are a discovery company. Our whole credo is to understand what is the Achilles heel in infectious disease, find new chemistries that inhibit that, new combinations of ways of treatment. And I'm looking at even nutraceuticals in terms of our approach, natural products, and then bring those forwards to someone who can take it into clinical trials or take it through non-human primate studies, who has the financial wherewithal. Unfortunately, that's the pharmaceutical industry that we have to partner with, because there's no one who's going to give us $50 million to do the next step, and that's what that would cost. So, you know, it's a struggle. I hope I explained the history of this so that people understand that this didn't come from another planet. We understand our financially driven incentive for having a response to disease that has put us into this flat-footed strike three against the coronavirus. And then going forwards, it's people power. People power controlled it in 2002. People power controlled it in 2012. We're controlling it now, quote unquote, flattening the curve by isolation and making sure that people who are infected get proper medical care. This will go away. We'll probably be reminiscing in the fall about what this was like, and sitting up in the north while it's summer, looking down in South America and Africa and Australia in the winter while it takes over that planet, part of our planet. We've just seen the northern hemisphere take over. Now it's switching to winter down there. We'll see southern hemisphere outbreak, and those people have no wherewithal to handle this, no infrastructure. Talk about having not enough respirators. So by the time we're in the fall, we'll be looking at other people who have this problem, like we were looking at China at one time. It may stay quiet for a year or two. Maybe it'll be 5 or 8 year trend, but coronavirus is coming back, and we have to be prepared. We can't be strike three and looking for strike four. We have to be prepared. And what I'm out there advocating is that our government, and this is my political opinion, and I'll couch it at that, strictly my own opinion, our government needs to create a national biodefense reserve where we understand not how to use pathogens to kill other people, it's for black ops, but how to prepare ourselves for the known unknowns. When will Corona come back? With the same level of taxpayer dollars supporting that as a national repository for treatments. So with the same spirit of, why do we spend so much money on nuclear weapons and on new jets and everything? Taxpayers don't get any say in that. We spend billions of dollars doing that, but we spend a fraction of that amount of money trying to create a reservoir of treatments that would save us in case measles breaks out, in case polio comes back, tuberculosis, all these kind of things. We're doing nothing to prepare ourselves. And if history teaches us, when Corona comes back, it will have sampled the entire globe's genetic code for our immune system. It will know everything about us now. And we will select, by it passing through the globe, passing through us, we will select for a yet more virulent strain. And that's just the way biology works. It struggles to survive, and viruses are no different. So we as intelligent beings need to do something to create a shield for society and for our economy. So that, I'm going to stop at that soapbox there and take other questions.
Great. Harold, we'll postpone questions to the second half. I want to give Caleb ample time to address a lot of the big things that are happening on the legalization front, regulatory perspective. But yeah, truly, we can't be more thankful for that perspective. A lot of depth there, and yeah, I think it's really important to begin to create more context around this conversation versus the scare. And yeah, so just really thank you for your time, and we'll definitely have more time for questions. And we got a couple already in the doc to send your way. Great.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Kaylin, I'll invite you to unmute as you're ready.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Harold. That was excellent. So, you know, as kind of Harold described, coronavirus, COVID-19 has pretty much touched all parts of our society and our economy and government, and just like it had in China and Iran. And so unfortunately, the outlook for legalization of cannabis became, you know, much worse in the past few weeks. I think there was a lot of momentum at the end of February and into early March. You know, and unfortunately, New York State has bared the brunt of the initial, you know, as the initial epicenter for the outbreak in the country in terms of numbers. So, you know, a lot of resources has been going towards that, whether that's people resources or or money, right? Governor Cuomo said that over $1 billion have already been spent, and more money will also be spent. Some of the regulators leading the charge to get legalization done, and so the context basically is that you had the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act put in the 2021 fiscal year budget proposal from Governor Cuomo in mid-January. There was, it looked very similar to the Cannabis Regulation Tax Act that was released year prior. And so in a lot of ways it's very encouraging. There's a lot of parts of the bill that, will set up a unique and framework that will allow for a robust marketplace, diverse marketplace and craft-focused marketplace. But then also there's a lot of issues such as taxes, such as home grow, criminal penalties for possession. And but the major issue in the eyes of the legislature is the control over revenues and regulation that the governor has with the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. So the Assembly and the legislature had been working on their own bill, the Marijuana Regulation and Tax Act, which has been introduced for 3 or 4 years now. It's carried in the Senate by Senator Liz Krueger and carried in the Assembly by Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. And so they released their own version, the C version, meaning so they just took the bill and they updated it. They striked language and added language for the 3rd time. So it was the MRTA C that was released on March, I believe like March 12th. So the reasoning in a normal budget negotiation process is that you have the CRTA, they gained a bunch of input on the MRTA, and stakeholders told them, what they wanted to see, et cetera, and the lawmakers basically released that, and that would be the point of negotiation. That would be the starting point of negotiation between the Assembly or the legislature and the governor's office, the executive branch, right? Because in order to approve a budget, you approve any bill, you really need a 3-way agreement, right? So you need an agreement with the Assembly, the Senate, and the executive. So, and the budget is no different. The budget is, I believe it's 6 bills. And so, when we talk about including legislation in the budget, what it is part of these, one of these 6 bills, depending on, which bill affects different agencies and different, budgetary needs, you put that legislation, that's what the CRTA was, right? So it's not a standalone bill, it's part of a budget bill. But those budget bills need to be passed, right? So there's like 5 or 6 budget bills that need to be passed into session, and the in New York State requires it to be passed by April 1st, and Governor Cuomo has passed the budget by April 1st. I believe every single year that he's been in office. So April 1st is a pretty hard deadline and a normal budget year. So that legislation was put out there, and the idea is that as you ramp up, as you get closer to that deadline, negotiations get more urgent and they get more done in those negotiations. That's pretty much how New York governing works. Wait to the last minute. That's when things get done. And so that's what that was their play. That was their hand. And the MRTA is markedly different from the CRTA in a way that, it's pretty obvious that neither one would get passed on its own or would be agreed to on its own. So when they released it, within a week, the government completely shifted over to coronavirus response. And so the regulators and negotiators, as I was mentioning, really haven't been taking those meetings or been negotiating because they've, been consumed with other items in terms of the response to the virus. So what we haven't seen in the past 2 weeks really is any progress on a final bill. And so that leads me to believe that, comprehensive legalization of adult use cannabis will not happen this year. What I think may happen, from my understanding, is that the majority leader, Chris Peoples-Stokes, has wanted to see this done for a while, right? And as this has gotten closer to becoming a reality, you have more and more companies, organizations, and interests at the table saying, giving their piece and wanting what they want out of the legalization, right? So, what you've seen is, the executive balancing interests there and what they believe the program should look like, and then, the legislature making sure that, their allies are happy with the bill. And a lot of that is driven from, basically repairing a lot of the harms from the drug war for decades, and especially disadvantaged communities in urban areas to have opportunities in the marketplace, but more so than anything to receive allocated funding from the tax revenue. So the major difference between what the legislature wants and what the executive wants is the legislature wants to say, in the MRTA, it was 25% to the state lotto fund, which is education, and 25% to drug rehabilitation care, and then 50% to basically a community block fund, which would provide grants to certain communities that have designated as been disadvantaged. So, and that's after, so that's net. So that's after the program and research had money for the program, for the CRTA, for the Office of Cannabis Management, for research that SUNY would take up, would be spent. So, and also the Senate would appoint members of the committee and the directors that would actually govern the Office of Cannabis Management, as opposed to the CRTA, which would be a 5-person appointed board by the governor, right? So, those issues are fundamental, and those issues go past cannabis in terms of control over, discretionary control over funding, et cetera. So, but in that backdrop, obviously, Robert Mahica, the budget director, has said that, we're looking at possibly up to a $15 billion shortfall. So anything that's going to provide revenue is attractive in this process. And, politics is also in New York is driven by personality. And so Governor Cuomo's personality is out of control. And so, you've seen that in the press briefings that are now picked up on CNN and possibly watched more than our president's press briefings. And, Governor Cuomo, he's done a really good job of controlling the situation and breaking it down in a way that people understand. His infamous PowerPoint presentations are now famous throughout the country. In New York, we've been laughing about them for years, but he loves PowerPoints, and PowerPoints, he's good at PowerPoints. So, he's looking at this momentum where, he really can get any budget he wants done. He holds all the cards in the situation. So if he wanted to jam the CRTA, maybe with some revisions and some concessions, maybe for, some of the tax revenue being allocated here, he could. I don't know if he will, and I don't know from the optics of that situation what that would look like, legalizing adult use cannabis in the midst of a health crisis, which, obviously probably the vast majority of members on the call would understand, why it is a good idea, but yet we're also talking about, the populace, right? And Cuomo's not up for re-election, but a lot of the legislature is this fall. So what I think is going to happen is I think the CRTA in some form will be passed without Article 4, which is the article that would legalize adult use cannabis. So I think it's going to be passed. I think the medical program will expand. And I think that hemp would then fall from DOH control, Department of Health control, to a newly created Office of Cannabis Management. And if you create the Office of Cannabis Management, you have to pay for it. So it would cost the state money, which they may be able to recoup with adding additional medical cannabis licenses, which they estimate they can auction off for up to $25 million, which they probably could, which could pay for the program, the office, the people and their salaries and, website or whatever else, inspectors, whatnot. So I think that's what happens. And in that situation, it almost forces them to pass adult use cannabis next year, because you have a program that's set up to regulate adult use cannabis. It also allows the regulators to start to propose how exactly they would regulate it in terms of amount of licenses, tiers, et cetera. So it could be a positive development. I think it would be a positive development. I think it'd be probably best case scenario. From what I hear from the executive is it's a half loaf, right? So you're getting half the loaf. We're not getting adult use cannabis legalization, but we're getting the momentum. We're not losing that momentum that we gained this year and going into next year. So that's what I think is going to happen. But also anything can happen. Like I said, Governor Cuomo can do at this point whatever he wants with the state budget. He has all the power. You know, he may just pass the CRTA. Now, does that mean that it's a disaster for the cannabis industry? Not necessarily. I think that if the CRTA passed as is, the major concern is the taxes are absurd. They're $1 per gram. They come out to about 45%. We estimate about 45% net effect on the taxes. There's also some other issues in there, but I don't think the program would be rolled out between now and next legislative session. And so I do think there would be an opportunity next legislative session to change the taxes and to change parts of the bill that would, you know, allow it to become more palatable for the industry and also for lawmakers. So, you know, I think a forced passage of the CRTA would be a victory for the cannabis industry here. You know, you have about a year of the program then getting set up and propped up. I don't think you see any license issues at any time. But, you know, we could come back next legislative session. I don't know, Zach, you want me to take questions now? I saw Steve ask about the MRTA passing during regular legislative session. Unclear if a regular legislative session would even exist. After the lawmakers are eager to not be in Albany right now. And so if there was a legislative session, they would have to figure out some remote voting. The reason why everyone has said you can't get cannabis done in a regular legislative session is because, as most of you guys know, the Republicans technically controlled the state Senate up until 2018. And so what do we see in 2018 politically is we saw a blue wave, right? But really what we saw is the center, which decides most elections anyways, but the center of the electorate going from either staying home, voting for Donald Trump Republicans, to voting for palatable, what they consider palatable Democrats, which are moderate Democrats. So you see that all across the country. In Virginia, you see that in New York 22, which is my district, and Anthony Brindisi flipping a seat that won 15 points to Trump to Democrat. And you see it all over the place, right? Except for these dense population areas. But what we saw in 2018 in our state is the same phenomenon. So you see in Long Island and Westchester, which are purple areas, right? So they're not red, they're not blue. The center and more wealthy constituents really decide that, right? So they're not, they're probably mostly what we would consider independents, right? Voted in moderate Democrat candidates, and the Democrats now have a very large majority in the state Senate, right? But it's a somewhat tenuous majority, and it's a majority that could fall apart if you saw what we call the Long Island Six, right? So the Long Island Six are lawmakers from Long Island. Long Island is a conservative area, right? It's less conservative. It's suburbs, so it's less conservative than say suburbs around Atlanta, or and other places in the country where they're pretty deeply Republican, but it's still conservative. And so what you see lawmakers, these state senators, their district, almost all the mayors are Republicans, right? The county executives are Republicans. Almost all the lawmakers are Republicans. And so those lawmakers and those constituents have gone to them and said, we do not support legalizing adult use cannabis. And this is, the PTA has been very successful, and law enforcement is very successful in driving that conversation. So they feel that this vote would be used against them in the election, and they can't, even if they support it. And I've spoken to every single member of the Long Island Six, and also a few lawmakers in Westchester who are on the fence. They may support it behind closed doors, but they admit they cannot vote for it. So in the budget, when you have 6 bills, and the budget needs to be passed to run the state, they can say, we voted for the budget, we didn't vote for adult use cannabis. So, long answer to a short question, Steve, I do not think the MRTA would be passed, especially not this year, even if they were able to come back for session or vote remotely or call a special session. I mean, you might see piecemeal bills. So Diane Savino has entered a few medical expansion bills. I mean, I think, in my personal opinion, the greatest threat we have to an industry that we all say we want, a craft-focused industry, an industry that creates 1,000 millionaires instead of 1 billionaire, is the multi-state operators, the big cannabis companies, the companies that are registered organizations, medical registered organizations. If they can, they will monopolize as much of the industry as possible. They will be acquired. They will, merge. They will do whatever they need to do to have a stranglehold over the marketplace. And they're not necessarily New York-based companies. They might be here, but they're not, going to contribute much to our economy in the way that we think adult use cannabis could. So there's a lot of problems with the fact that the legislature and the executive were not able to get together and agree on a bill, even though we've had about 2 years to do so. So that's about it, Zach.
Great. So can you hear me all right now? Cool. I'm gonna take that as a no. Hey, Kaylin, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Zach.
Okay, great. Yeah, so folks, if there's anyone who has any questions, let's start with maybe cannabis-related questions, and then just to stay close to this theme, and then we'll expand into both through Harold and Kaylin. So if anyone has it, please. I think the easiest way is probably to submit the question via the chat. So if you don't know how to do that, I welcome you to voice your question by unmuting yourself. But I think the easiest way to keep it under control is to submit questions via chat.
Zach, I think there's a message from Mike Kincaid, a question for Dr. Harold. Oh, but that's over Corona.
So is Zach fielding the questions and interfacing, or what should we do?
Well, why don't I start with a question from Steve for Kaylin. What is the chance of the MRTA passing during the legislative session? I think you've been answering this though. Do we have the votes on Long Island? So
yeah, I saw that pop up, and so I kind of answered that.
Got it. So Dr. Harold, Michael was asking, is it so hard to develop a successful vaccine because of a wide diversity in corona mutations or because of a rapid turnover in mutations?
Well, and so that's a complicated answer, and I'm going to try to break that science down to simple models to explain that to you. In order for us to mount an immune response, we have to produce what are called antibodies. You may be familiar with that. Those are proteins that are shaped like Y structures. And anything that an antibody is produced to, that Y structure has to clamp onto the foreign object, right? It has to actually fit that perfectly. And in order for these two fingers to grip, they have to be perfectly genetically engineered by our cells to fit that. And that's why we are born with one antibody gene. And by the time we're my age, we have 2 billion versions of that gene to everything that the dirty sucker brought in from the infection that we had when we were, yesterday. So we are constantly trying to make new antibodies. Now, the real issue is, what is it about the virus when it's in your body that would look really aggressive enough for your body to make an antibody that would clamp onto that virus? And most of the work is speculative. You know, is it the outside of the virus? Is it a broken piece of the virus? And just for context, no, we didn't know any of this. We couldn't even approach that when polio was raging. And what they did was collect raw virus, polio virus, and boil it. So it was killed. And then they injected the killed virus into the bodies of people, kids, and things like that. And that killed virus is all crumpled and broken. And so it presents itself with opportunities for different antibodies to come at it. And that big mixture seems to be what worked for creating the Salk and Sabin polio virus. Not all other viruses lend themselves to that thing. And so what we're doing nowadays, like Moderna and others, are trying to pick a winner. The spike protein on the outside of that virus, that's exposed. So maybe that's what we could make a vaccine with. So they make the spike protein, they put it in your body, and then you're going to try to make a perfect antibody to that. And there's so many steps for what makes a perfect antibody that it is literally a moonshot. It's a best guess for what is a vaccine, and then almost a suck and see experiment to see if you actually respond with making a vaccine. Case in point, for 35 years, we've been trying to make a vaccine against HIV, and for 35 years, we failed to get anything. 3 different vaccines working together are only 30% effective. We can't make a vaccine against HIV, apparently. And what's happening now is everyone's trying to figure out a way to find the best guess. And if you basically look at the palm of my hand, let's say this is part of the virus, this hand needs to grab something in order for the virus to work. And so I say, oh, that's fantastic. This must be a weakness. Let me make an antibody to the palm of my hand. And so for the virus, an analogy. So now I have a perfect antibody in the laboratory that binds to the palm of my hand and keeps my hand from closing. So now I've crippled the virus. Segue to reality. In your body, it's never a palm, it's always this. And what it is like this kind of grip. So no antibody can get in because it's never an open palm, it's always closed. And that's the dilemma we face. How to find the perfect vaccine to elicit the strongest antibody that will actually, in the end, give you lifelong protection against future infections. It's a perfect goal. It's a beautiful goal. If it works, great, you know, but it's like version 2.0. Right now we have a more immediate problem in saving lives. I hope that answered your question.
Doctor, a follow-up on that. If they would have found a vaccine for coronavirus last 2 times, as you were discussing in your conversation, would that, being that this corona is a mutation from the prior ones, would that vaccine still be effective because it targeted the coronavirus specifically?
Yeah, and it's an excellent question that would have to have been tested in Wuhan. I would have liked to have someone say when they were standing up in the early days and Wuhan was going out of control, that we have a vaccine that we developed in 2012. We're going to deploy that and see if it actually controls the Wuhan version of the virus, knowing that there could be genetic differences. All you would need is a subtle change. And now, the palm analogy, the genetic code would code for wide open, but a mutation might code for this. And now it's not quite the same palm anymore. That's what we face. All coronaviruses are about 85% identical. In the certain areas where my company and Gilead are targeting, and a recent one from Emory, the place we're targeting is 96% identical between coronaviruses. It's a good target, it's a necessary target, and it'll probably affect all coronaviruses, because if they escape in that region by making mutations, they may actually hurt the virus more than just simply escaping. So scientists like myself look for the weakness, look for the conserved nature of the weakness across biology, and then ask the question, is that actually druggable? Could you develop a vaccine or a chemistry that drugs that? So yeah, there's a chance that if we had a vaccine, it would be kind of like our flu vaccine, right? You know that is today's vaccine was last year's outbreak in Thailand. And so we develop a vaccine against what happened in another part of the world last year. And that's all we're not clairvoyant. We can't see into the future. So we say, oh, that one's there. Let's make a vaccine against that and hope that it still has enough oomph to it to treat anything that comes the next year. Frequently, it's not as good. Like this year's vaccine is not as good as protecting against the flu. And that's because it didn't quite adapt to the new version of the flu. The old version was different enough where that antibody clips to, and it didn't work as well. Even a bad vaccine, let's say it's only 30% effective. So instead of your disease rising rapidly in your body with symptoms, now it rises at about 60% or 40% of that rate. So you don't feel as bad as soon, and you don't stay sick as long. Even if a vaccine could blunt how fast the virus takes over, it would be a win, because it would kind of slow down, the whole process of how fast that peak rises, and it would essentially flatten the curve if we could have any vaccine that worked. There was nothing from 2012 and 2002, nothing. So we're starting from scratch, and that's why I'm saying it's version 2.0, because the time it takes to do the good science to find something that works is not there.
No, that's great, Harold. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Kaylin, question for you.
From
Paul Elstrom. I sent to you, and I'll read it out loud to everyone. Do you expect the OCM to regulate hemp-based CBD and CBG products that sets the standard for the industry in terms of traceability and quality control? Will heavy metals and pesticide testing be required for raw material? And will smokable hemp be addressed by the OCM? Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, first off, my opinion, one of the only legislative victories cannabis got last year was the hemp extract bill to get done. Hemp extract bill absolutely, does set the standard for the whole country in terms of traceability and quality control. And yeah, it requires GMP standards on manufacturers and GMP CFR 111 standards, dietary supplement standards for manufacturers and processors. And so, yeah, you do have to get that sort of testing, and that also allows the OCM to add other regulations in terms of on the point of harvest and what testing you need there. So that is going to affect. May 1st, it goes into effect. It is enforceable in terms of all products sold in New York State on January 1st of 2021. So January 1st, 2021, every single product in New York State has to be held to these same standards that New York producers are already there on. And yeah, so the hemp extract bill was passed in December. It was carried by Donald Pardo. Donald Pardo got it passed. She's actually my assemblywoman, so we worked very closely with her on that. And it was chaptered, meaning it was changed by by the way of negotiation, and the chapter passed in January. So it's in the books, it's in effect. So if the OCM was created, then yes, they would be tasked with implementing and enforcing those standards. Smokable hemp, honestly, we probably hope that it wasn't addressed by the OCM for as long as possible, because when they do address it, I don't see hemp designed for inhalation being approved by New York State unless it's sold in a dispensary. I think that selling hemp as a raw product to consumers in like a jar or a package, I think that will be allowed with maybe some sort of quality standards, some sort of testing required. But selling hemp cigarettes or hemp joints, the best case scenario is we get taxed on those. That being said, if there was a legislative session I do know that Senator Lombardo is planning to pass a bill that would allow farmers to sell directly to consumers in statute, and then also, require the New York State to come up with some regulations. But in terms of inhalation, I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, and also in the backdrop of a respiratory disease outbreak, I don't think you're going to see the executive look to say, yes, it's approved. The best thing is they do what they're doing now and just look the other way, right? And that's what they're doing. Honestly, they know it's there. They're looking the other way. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question, Paul.
Great. And Kaylin, one more question to follow up. Is there conversation about taxation structure? And maybe Jason Klimek, you have perspective of that regarding CBD or CBG in this case, as the last question alluded to?
8% sales tax, and your license fees is a tax. So they are probably going to raise the license fees, but there's not going to be an excise tax on hemp. That's not a conversation that's being had, or at least that I'm aware of. So.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question for Harold, actually. So Harold, you say you need, 50 million. So is that really, so the money to go into sort of clinical trials, that's really what's been holding up? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Just to give you a feel for the history of bringing any given drug forwards for a viral disease, that's HIV and others, is that it costs, in the end, about $1 billion to bring a drug to where doses are available for doctors to prescribe. And it can cost 40-some million just to get through the scientific part of what is the POM and what interacts with the POM in a safe manner but kills the virus. Typically someone's looking at about a $20 million tag just to get it to a conversation with the FDA. Then you have to pay $140,000 to file with the FDA. And then you have to hire physicians who will lead the clinical trials. And now you're up to about $10 million for just to test normal volunteers. Once you start testing people with COVID-19, that test is somewhere between $20 and $40 million. And phase 2 gets you only a limited number of people. So what that phase 2 for 40 million would be, say, the 15% who are in the hospitals. That's what that test would be for about 40 to 60 individuals. After you were successful and you've gone through phase 1 and phase 2, phase 3 is like kids with corona, old people with corona, people living in the Southwest. So it's diversity now in how well the drug works at different doses. So that phase 3 is about $300 to $500 million to run. And you're paying drug producers, doctors, and patients and everything else. And then the analysis labs who look at all the samples, it's about $500 million. And so just to get to the point where it is now on the market after phase 3, you're almost up to $1 billion, right? Wow. And that's really the cost. So Oyogen is a small company. We have 6 people. We're focusing very much on the science of understanding how does disease work, what is essential. We pluck that out and we say, can you actually put drugs on it? And we find those. And now the next thing we have to do is partner with someone who has legs, to move this into those 10, 20, 30, $300 million experiments. That's, if we did that, it would pull us off the mark. We'd be a one-trick pony. We're actually focused on, as I said, trying to create a national reserve of treatments for diseases that we don't have now or do have now, but essentially we're looking at future treatments and partnering those with the pharma. If there was a wealthy individual who wanted to live vicariously through my credo of doing this and bringing Oya 1 all the way through to where all of us could see it in New York as an option, we would need someone probably to plunk $30 million in. And, at that point in time, those kind of dollars, you're really looking at an M&A, as they say, merger and acquisition of our company, because someone would have to have substantial part of us to be willing to put that kind of money at risk.
Dr. Harold, another question from Paul. What about the combination of the malaria drug and the zithromycin, Z-Pak? Zithromax is an antibiotic indicated for bacterial infections, not viral. There's a question mark at the end of that.
Yeah, and the answer is, as phase 1 or plan, version 1.0 goes, you never know what's really going to work in biology. As much as we are such masters of what we can understand, there's an infinite amount that we don't know. So 2 combinations of drugs that just seem like, what? Could work in your body in combination. And so that's what I'm saying. Ideas that are in hand now that are known to affect the virus and are known to be safe, we should put on the first lap of the race. Let's get those going. And instead we don't do that. We try to pick up winners and losers and argue about what should be done. Let's get everything that can be safely put against this virus and sort it out. And if in the end of those days, nothing is any good, then at least we have started version 2.0 of making vaccines and trying to discover something good. This is the plan A, plan B process. And so I would like to see OYA 1 get implemented. I'd like to see New York be the state that is the first to do that. I'd like to see it actually change the course, the tide of this infection, and then go into other countries where we could try to create a ring of defense by loading people up with OYA 1. I would, I aspire to that. But it doesn't have to be me. What has to be is that we come up with something as humanity. And so everything needs to be tried, and it would be irresponsible to rule something out because it doesn't sound quite right. We just don't know.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone who's got any other questions?
I thought Chris would have a question, but he's sitting there silently, I can tell.
Uh-huh.
This is Mike Kincaid. I have a question. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, I do.
Yep, we can hear you.
So this is kind of cannabis related. This is a question for Dr. Smith. I know some growers use selenium applications to denature virus coats, their protein coats.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume the virus can create antibodies based on your last answer. I was just wondering if there's any kind of crossover into human systems, and my 3-year-old daughter is now entering the room, so I apologize if you hear some background noise. Okay. But I was wondering, kind of what your perspective is as a cannabis scientist and on full spectrum cannabis on using alternate methods to, improve the overall health of the human system so that maybe we can use some of our body's natural defense mechanisms to treat this, really any kind of infectious disease. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how full spectrum medicine or multi, factor medicine relates to this issue. So I'll go on mute and let you answer at your leisure. Thank you.
And I'm sure there's others on this Zoom meeting that can contribute to that answer, but I'll just start with saying that the reason why the elderly are in a unique vulnerability, high risk group of our population is that as you get older, you tend to have compromises in your immune system, some of which is related to nutritional quality, how many times someone eats and how much food they eat. So there's just something as basic as not maintaining your diet that causes you gradually to decay in your immune system. And then when something like Corona comes along, as an older person, you have dropped your defenses, whereas a child is challenging their immune systems on an everyday basis in just what's their fingers in their mouths and stuff like that. So the kids have a robust immune system versus us. The full spectrum product is there's actual enough scientific literature now to cause me to believe that there's value in understanding that that is immune modulating chemical composition coming out of the plant. Not a single thing perhaps, but in concert working with our system, endocannabinoid system. And that being able to suppress negative inflammatory responses, which you may have heard in the literature that the virus induces a cytokine storm. You know, we want to modulate our response. It has to be measured. You know, you can't blow off a nuke and then survive it just to take out the enemy. You have to be very careful. And our body has a tendency to be like really hyper reactive and cause tissue damage. That's why you see a bee sting get red and swollen. That's why you end up reacting to different things and choking from an allergy or something like that. We tend to overreact. We will lose our blood pressure because we dump all this chemistry in response to warfare against whatever it is, and we kill us. And that's, so cannabis full spectrum specifically, not single shot CBD or CBN or something like that, full spectrum has a way of controlling all the immune system so that we have like a level playing field in our response to it. So then there's the other aspect of controlling anxiety, and especially CBD and high CBD products. I think right now the world could use a little CBD in everything they take in just to chill. I mean, we gotta rationally respond to this. So maybe daily doses of full spectrum high CBD product would allow us to think clearer in this time of pandemic.
Yeah, very interesting. Paul did share, he said there's some encouraging data from a study in France regarding the Z-Pack. Have you heard anything about that, Dr. Harold?
Yes. It's a combination of three things, I believe, if I've got that correct. It's, yeah, I mean, like this is the putting the race cars down on the first lap, right? We've essentially been playing favorites, and so maybe they have something. So the press diverts all the attention over to that. And maybe this guy has something. You know, it reminds me of the Charlie's Angels scene where Lucy slaps on the writing crop on the desk and says, does anyone else have a great idea like this man? Let's keep the Coke machines full. You know, it's just like, yeah, all these things are shiny objects, and people are desperate to know that someone out there has control over this and their lives can resume to normal. I'm saying, let's look at this rationally. We have to actually determine how every idea actually will play out. I can't pick from here winners or losers. I can't look at a study of 20 people in Italy that have received something, or France has received something, and say for sure that that's good for all. I mean, we just don't know, because everyone sitting on this conference has a different genetic makeup. And while one person or 10 people might tolerate something to kill the disease, 2 or 3 of us will have no tolerance for that whatsoever, and we may die because of the treatment. And that's just what you don't know until you do the first lap around the track of how safe is something. And we're saying that relatively safe doses of chloroquine are achievable in people. It's been used since 1934 to treat malaria. It's expensive to produce in that the amount of chloroquine that's needed, or the amount of any of these other things that are needed, require thinking about manufacturing. You know, those of you who are producing hemp or producing doses or products understand the conundrum of getting enough of the active ingredient made, but then having it in doses for enough people. And anything that you require a whole bunch of is going to cost, to be effective, is going to cost a lot more money, which means fewer doses for the people who need it. And that's why we have to continue to look for things such as Oya 1, my company's compound, that is so far, if you rank order, is anywhere between 500 and 10 times more effective, which means that you have to make less of it, and therefore more doses can come to people at a lower cost for the drug. So that's a consideration that is a manufacturing engineering consideration for bringing a drug forward. Everything needs to be tried, though, at this point. I don't think we have the luxury to pick and choose whether something's chocolate or vanilla. We have to really put everything down and take a look at it.
Great. We have time for probably just one more question. If there's not another question, there's other stuff that can be addressed in this moment. So I'll offer that up if anyone's got one last thought they want to ask.
Hey, Zach.
Oh, yep.
Zach, it's Paul Elstrom. Sorry for so many questions. Thank you, Dr. Smith. Can I just make like a PSA, a public service announcement? You know, our farm, we grow, in addition to hemp, we grow lettuce and herbs. And up until a week and a half ago, we supplied the schools of Western New York, like Buffalo County schools and Niagara Wheatfield schools, with their lettuce and herbs. And now we have, you know, we planted those seeds, you know, 30 days ago. So we're going to have a lot of lettuce coming out of our facility over the next 2 weeks with no home. So if anyone in the community knows of, you know, a charity we can donate it to, or if anybody's hungry, we'd like to do something besides compost. All of this beautiful lettuce will be growing with no home. So if anyone wants to, I'll put my information on the group chat. If anyone has a charity or something, or, you know, animal rescue or something we can donate to, please let me know. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if you can share that information with me. This is Zach speaking again, as a follow-up, and I'll send out through the listserv. And yeah, I really appreciate that offer.
It seems there's a lot of kitchens and Food Link that could be contacted who's producing meals in our cities for people who don't have the means for their own. It seems like lettuce would be a very welcome thing.
Yep. So we work with Eden Valley Growers, which is a USDA food hub that is seeking to reduce food miles for Western New York.
Yeah.
So all of our product will be available there. People can pull up and, you know, buy it directly from the distributor, because they were, you know, distributing to restaurants, and obviously that's gone. So, you know, we're just looking for an outlet.
Yeah.
For the stuff that's,
you
know, already growing. It's in inventory. So, and it's perishable, so it's got to go or it's got to get thrown out. So I'll put the information on.
We'll be sure to share that out through the listserv as well. I appreciate that again, Paul.
Thanks.
So we're going to transition towards the tail end of this conference call. I just want to say that, again, there's first and foremost, Kaylin and Dr. Harold, thank you so much for your perspectives. I think conversations like this are grounding from both cases, and providing insight and connecting industry experts to the stakeholders in our communities is really what our goal is to be doing with HempLab. And yeah, I feel a lot more knowledgeable and grounded about forecasting what's in front of us. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Secondly, again, I got to give a big thanks to our members, specifically Harris Beach and some of the groups I mentioned earlier, Boyle & Co., the New York State Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, Canamil. All these groups have been coming together. They see the vision of HempLab. We're trying to continue to put on more and more webinars and field trips, as well as seminars, as this year builds out, and your contribution goes a long way. We're an independent, not-for-profit, self-funded up until now, the support of our members. So if you like what we're doing, I'll share a link to our membership in the chat right now. I'll send it out on the email. But it really does go a long way, and if you want to see us keep building stuff like this to help our community build itself, that's what we're here to do. And I really, regardless, thank you all for taking the time to sit on this call. And, we're anticipating the next roundtable to also be probably a call-in of this nature. And we're actually looking to readjust some of our April schedule to include a couple more webinars that, will replace the scheduling we built out for April that has now been canceled due to social distancing requirements. So if anyone has any questions, I'll share information about Paul's lettuce production, and just to see, there's some questions or recommendations about reaching out to Headwater or United Way, which is great. Thank you, Cynthia. And yeah, we'll keep going from there. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts right now, we got another second, another minute, I should say. But regardless, I really appreciate everyone taking the time this morning, and yeah, really happy to be connecting. And if you aren't already, sign up for. I imagine most of you got this information through our newsletter. And if you're not getting email notifications, we're really gentle with our listserv. We try not to abuse it. But if you want to stay informed, please send us a message at info@nyhemplab.org or on this chat thread. With that, there's no other questions, it seems. Thank you all so much. Hope you all stay healthy, and wishing you the best to your friends and family.
Thank you, Zach.
We'll be here. Yep. Of course, thank you.
Thank you.